Hi, I'm Jeff Ray, your host for Economic Outlook. Welcome to our program. We hope you enjoy the show. Please make plans each week to join us as we discuss the region's most important economic development initiatives with a panel of experts. The National Restaurant Association forecasts sales will top $1 trillion for the first time in history, and the nation's second largest private sector employer is on track to add 200,000 jobs, bringing employment to 15.7 million. We're diving deep into the state of the restaurant industry with two prominent local owners coming up on Economic Outlook. The restaurant industry is the second largest private sector employer. 2024 looks to be a good year for the industry as forecasts call for increased sales, more hiring, and strong competition. This week we're sitting down with a couple of local restaurant owners for a deeper dive into the industry and what you can expect locally. Please join me in welcoming Kurt Janowski, the owner of the Navarre Hospitality Group, which operates several restaurants across north central Indiana, and Peg Dalton, the co-owner of Peg's in downtown South Bend. Guys, welcome. Thanks. Glad to have you guys back.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks for having us.
So interested, as we've read reports like from the National Restaurant Association, thought this would be a great topic to kind of dive deeper into the industry, and you guys certainly you guys live it every day, so we're glad that you came here. Maybe just for a quick introduction first, Peg, let me come your way. If somebody's not familiar with Peg's, give us just a high-level overview of it.
Sure. We operate in the 100 block of Michigan Street. We're breakfast and lunch, and it's a full breakfast menu. We do a little bit of catering, but mostly everything we do is in-house. We've been there 23 years, have the staff to prove that, have had many people with me for a long time, and that's what I believe to be the key to our success. So I'm still in the building every day if I'm in town. If I'm not in town, of course I'm not, but I think it's really important to have my feet on the ground there.
Great. And Kurt, let me come your way. If somebody doesn't know Navarre Hospitality, talk to us a little bit about what Navarre Hospitality does.
We're a collection of 8 bars and restaurants and 6 catering venues in South Bend, Elkhart, Granger, and Mishawaka.
Great. So name a couple of the brands maybe people might.
Cafe Navarre is kind of the flagship. Artisan in Elkhart, Rocky River Tap and Table, O'Rourke's, Doc Pierce's.
Okay.
Spirited here a little across the street. So
great. No, thank you. Well, thank you both. Both I've been to many, and you have some terrific operations here. Let's start maybe a little bit more personal, if you will. Let's talk about this journey. Peg, you mentioned like 23 years you've been at this. It seems like everybody has a little bit of a fantasy to run a restaurant. It's a tough industry to get into. The success rates sometimes aren't there. Talk a little bit about what inspired you to sort of follow a path years ago to get in the restaurant industry.
Sure. This was not my plan. It fell kind of into my lap when I was at school in Bloomington, and started as a waitress in a restaurant that needed a manager pretty quick. And I thought that I would just do that part-time, and 37 years later, here I am. So I experienced working for a couple different people, and I worked the same way when I was working for someone as I work now as owning the place. So always have taken great pride in what I do, and I really love what I do. I say frequently I feel very fortunate to get a paycheck for what I love doing. So it was not my plan. I was going to school to be a teacher. My plan shifted, and I feel blessed to have figured this out. It's not everyone gets that, right? So
my guess is you still had a chance to teach a lot of people.
I have
a lot
been
of
able
people
to,
have been working with you.
I sure have. Still,
Yes,
every day.
Yes,
every day.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Kurt, talk a little bit about your path. Sort of what inspired you to get into the restaurant
similar
business?
story.
Yeah.
I started working when I was 14 in a restaurant, and I've never worked anywhere else. So originally it was going to be save money for college, and then it became all I've ever done. So started out washing dishes and cooked and waited tables and bartended, and which is essential to be able to operate a successful restaurant. I know Peg would share this, that you've got to be able to do every job in the building, because you're going to have to do every job in the building at some point.
Yeah. So Peg, I'll come back your way. So as I mentioned, this is a really competitive industry. The success rates aren't always the best. Somebody in business school might be looking at those rates and say, I'm not sure if that's the right path for me, because it's a lot of hard work and the hours and stuff. But talk a little bit about just sort of the advice you might give to that person who's thinking about doing something in the restaurant space.
Well, it is risky, I would say. If people ask me that, did you realize what a big risk you were taking? I didn't. I didn't feel like it was that big of a risk because I felt very confident in what we were doing. So I never felt that, and which is a good thing. Had I felt that, I might not have done it. But I do believe it is risky. It takes a lot of hard work and dedication. I sometimes look back on the 18 years of 7 days a week, and with a little wish I had maybe been home on more Saturdays. But I quickly tell myself the restaurant is where it is today because of the hard work that I put in. So, and all three of my children still love their mother, so it all worked
That's
out.
right,
It's
yes.
still it worked
great.
out okay. But I
Yeah.
can kind of think that. So, to a person who's thinking about it, don't think that you're not going to work hard, because you're going to work very hard, and you're going to need to be a strong leader. My staff knows I set the bar very high. I do all of our interviewing and all of our hiring, and we're smaller. I can do that, but I let them know right away. You're going to work hard here. Watch, look around, and
Yeah.
see what everybody else is doing. And if you don't like to work hard, this is not the place for you. You're going to be well rewarded, but you're going to work hard. So I think that that's really important, and it's important to just be a good, strong leader. I know I can't do it all.
Yep.
I can do it all. I know that.
That's right.
You know what
Yes,
I mean?
I know exactly what you.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it's interesting. I grew up in retail. My family had drugstores and such, and very similar. The hours are crazy, but that family time and that chance to serve the public is such a fun and important team. Kurt, a similar question. So talk about just sort of again your experience, your advice as you're thinking about as people are thinking about this. Again, I think a lot of people have this fantasy. I ought to open a restaurant, but it's not as easy as that.
I wouldn't pursue that fantasy. It's been really good for me, but
Yeah.
when I started, I was 20 years old when I bought my first restaurant, so there isn't anything to risk because you got nothing to lose when you're 20.
Right.
So I do know, and you run across people who are thinking of it as a next career, and so they've got children and mortgages and college to pay for, and they're thinking about quitting their day job and opening a restaurant, and I would tell all of those people not to do it. It is riskier than you need to do. And I would also say that it's important to come from the business, right? If you work in a restaurant and then let's decide to own it, perfect, right? If you want to go from being an employee to being an employer, I strongly support that. But if you're not from this business, it's probably not for you. My stepdaughter was getting ready to go to the prom, and my wife said, so tell Janie about some of your prom stories. And I don't have any prom stories because for the 4 years I was in high school, I worked prom night all 4 of those years, right? So that's what you do. When other people are playing and having fun, you're working. And if that's not for you, then I wouldn't get into this business. Not so hard anymore. I'm a little longer in the tooth, and we've got a great team, so I'm not in the restaurants working service. But you will be for the first 20 years. And so if you can't see past that, then I wouldn't, it's not something I would encourage any good friend of mine to do.
Right. Yep. No, I think that's some great, honest advice, and I think we always appreciate sharing that with our viewers. Kurt, let me stay with you for a second. So I term this a little bit like the state of the restaurant industry. You operate several different things across the marketplace. Can you give us kind of a high level, like I think as a diner, for example, I got a lot of options in this area, Southwest Michigan or Central Indiana. Almost anything I want, I can find it. Give us just a little state of the industry, if you will.
Sure.
What the market's like, that kind of stuff.
We have a really strong and healthy restaurant market in our region, and it hasn't always been that way. It was chain dominated for 20 years, and now I would say that's no longer the case. There's plenty of chains still out there. Another one opened this week, I guess, on Main Street. But I think that when you ask most people in the area, name some restaurants you like to go to, top of mind are more likely than not going to be some of the independents. Especially where we are here in downtown South Bend, it is a strong independent, there's 50 independent restaurants within a stone's throw of where we're sitting. So it's a good environment for restaurants. I will say it's also a little bit of an overly competitive environment for restaurants, right? There's There's an awful lot of them. St. Joseph County Health Department issues 1,600 permits in St. Joseph County alone. So now that's everything from 7-Eleven that serves hot dog in every grocery store, but there's a lot of restaurants in that number. But it's industry-wide, it's really healthy. You opened with the number of jobs and the number of the total top-line revenue in the United States will top $1 trillion for the first time in 2024. There's about 13,000 full-service restaurants in the state of Indiana. And we're, like you said, the second largest private employer in the country. So a lot of people work in restaurants. 9 out of 10 adults I read had at some point in their life worked in a restaurant. Isn't that interesting?
It is, and honestly though, I think, and you maybe started touching even on the customer service piece of this. Like I cut my teeth both in the drugstore and in a restaurant and some of that stuff, and I'd almost take those employees any day, right? Because once they sort of learn some of those valuable lessons you talked about, like I got to do everything here, I think they're much better employees. So you in many cases sometimes are the first piece of this training ground for our future workforce.
Yeah, that's often true. Yeah,
Yes,
that's
it
for
is.
sure.
Mhm. And I employ a lot of young people, and I consider it my job as well as the senior staff to let them understand about hard work and work ethic and asking for help and all these things that skills that transfer, customer service, that can transfer to anything. So
Yeah, I think that's great. I want to stay with you for kind of what we talked to Kurt about. So you've been in the business for a couple of years now, and so you've seen this restaurant marketplace in the region change and evolve and such. You were plowed the field, if you will, downtown. One of the first folks down here. So just talk a little bit about just sort of the state of the industry from your perspective and how things have changed during your time in leadership.
So one substantial change is we're not the only breakfast place in our downtown anymore. That's a big change. You know that. I have said that for years, that we were really lucky to be one of the only full service dining downtown. Now that has changed, but that hasn't impacted us negatively. It just gives people more choices. More people are coming downtown specifically, not talking about the region, but more people are coming downtown for breakfast, and there are more choices. There's still plenty coming through my doors, so it's just fine. In fact, it's better than ever. I think breakfast as a day part has grown substantially in our 23 years of business, and there are many reasons to that. We held our own during 2008 when the economy went in the tank, and I had a theory about that people are taking more clients out to breakfast than out to dinner. It's less expensive to do that, and all of our offices around us were filled. That has changed a bit since COVID, but it's still just fine. It's great, in fact. And we, after COVID, when we reopened, we're only operating 5 days a week rather than 7 days a week, and our sales continue to grow beyond what we were doing in 7 days. So even though we're paying people more, which Kurt and I were talking about before the interview, it's so important that we're contributing to people earning more and having a better lifestyle. Happy to give those raises, and our bottom line just looks different, and that's okay, because we're providing something great for the people that work for us. So things have been great for us, and I speak a little bit less globally, I guess. I don't have all the
that's all right.
all the numbers that Kurt might have.
And Kurt, maybe build on this a little bit, because as Peg mentioned, employees are making a little more, costs are a little higher, but still predicted to be a record year for restaurants. Talk about maybe that employee piece in particular, because you, like every employer, got to attract this talent, and I got to retain them if I can. Talk about the evolution that's happened in that space.
Well, everything changed with COVID, right? Yeah. So everyone quit the restaurant business, and I didn't blame them. A lot of my colleagues in the business and people I know were wringing their hands and banging the table and mad, and I said, hey, we had it coming. For a long time, people that worked in our industry were doing it temporarily. They couldn't support a family on this, so they didn't consider it a career or the job in the way we want them to, and that's our fault, right? If you're making $10 an hour, how can we expect them to commit their life to what they're doing? So those days are over. I'm glad they're over. Our employees are glad they're over. So now it's easier. We pay much better. We have benefits. It's a very competitive landscape, and we compete not against other restaurants in our heads anyway. We talk about competing against other industries. So I've got to get a welder that might be working for an RV supplier to consider being a line cook. And so I've got to pay him or her those kinds of wages, and we are. And you won't get laid off. So we've never laid an employee off, and I mean, I've been at it for 40 years. And other than COVID, I have to do that caveat where we laid 100% of our employees off. But it's been a good, positive thing. I think we didn't know whether, because we've got to pass some of that additional expense onto the consumer, and we didn't know if people would pay $5 more for that entree so that we could pay the line cook $4 more an hour. And what we found out is they are. So the fact that we're not in it alone makes it easier, right? Everybody had to adjust. So restaurant employees getting a raise was a good thing, and I'm glad it happened.
No, I think that's great, and having known many of your staff, you've got some really phenomenal people on your teams, and much like we've talked a lot on this show about retaining those people and attracting and how important that is. I want to shift a little bit. So our show generally has a jobs, economy, economic development, kind of focus. Both of you have been key catalysts to redevelopment of areas that needed somebody like you to kind of bring folks in, and so I want to spend a few minutes on that space. Maybe if I could come your way first, because when you made the decision to move from suburban to downtown, some people probably looked at you and thought you're crazy, what the heck are you doing down there and stuff, but you found a way to make that work. Talk about just that role you've played as kind of a catalyst to help sort of revitalize downtown.
Right. I am kind of a collaborator by nature, so it was important to me to understand the landscape when we were coming downtown, get to know our neighbors, and not just the restaurants, because there weren't many restaurants at that time, but get to know the people in the offices and work that way to help build the business. The weekends were a different story. I'm sure I've told you this before. When I was at the restaurant on a Saturday before we opened, there were 0 cars on the street, and I called my then partners and said, what are we thinking? There's no one down here on a Saturday. Mm-hmm. They said, it'll be okay. It'll be okay. And it was okay from the very first Saturday. I think people were looking for dining in our downtown, and it happened pretty quick for us. So I'd love to, say thank you. I was a trailblazer. It happened naturally. I think our area was ready for that, and we worked hard. What we do inside our walls makes a big difference, right, as to whether or not people are coming back. So I have to give a lot of credit to my staff and take some of that credit myself, but people were ready for it, or all of these restaurants that have happened in the 20 plus years that we've been there wouldn't be surviving or thriving. So
yep. Kurt, let me come your way, because when I think about you and Navarre Hospitality, I think what an important catalyst with the revitalization of the old First Bank building for Cafe Navarre, or in particular of more interest recently in Elkhart with Artisan and some of the other things you're doing down there. Talk about just maybe the important role your industry plays in helping add to that quality of life for a community and help revitalize.
Well, the buzzword for a while now has been placemaking, right? And attracting and retaining talent requires, one of the first things people mention is restaurants when they talk about that. They want a vibrant restaurant scene. If you want to move into a place, you want some culture, but I guarantee you're going to go to a restaurant a heck of a lot more often than you're going to go to a baseball game or a show. And it's important, right? And luckily the community supported it. I think economic development efforts in our region recognize the value of good restaurants, so they're supportive and helpful when they can be. Cafe Navarre was a risk downtown, right? That was a large investment. La Salle Grill was an established, excellent restaurant downtown, been here by themselves in that in that market for quite some time, and there was no hesitancy on our part, but a lot of people, as you mentioned, were looking at me going, "You sure you don't want to do this in Granger or
Right.
Mishawaka where everyone else is doing it?" And we like downtowns, so 3/4 of our businesses are downtown, and we like old buildings is the other thing. It's it's nice to have some charm in the place you're dining. So we're glad that it's worked out, and we're glad to be a part of economic development in the areas we serve.
Great. Kurt, can I ask you to maybe expand a little bit more on Elkhart in particular, just because an important part of our viewing area, we've had the maybe Elkhart leadership on a number of times to really talk about kind of the revitalization of downtown, some of the new buildings down there and stuff. So, so if people aren't familiar with sort of the product or kind of what you're doing downtown Elkhart, we want to encourage them to go visit, remind them what's over there for them to visit.
A lot happened in Elkhart, right? So started probably with the Lerner Theater revitalization, $18 million in 2011, and that kind of was a catalyst. And then to presently, where we just broke the ground on the next phase in the River District, which is a bunch of apartments and for sale homes and retail and restaurants in the River District in front of the new Aquatic Center and along that area. And then in between Artisan in 2014, 2015 we opened, and Four Diamond Restaurant. There's never been one in Elkhart County. Now there are 2 a quarter of a mile away, and down 5 in the state, 2 in Elkhart, Indiana. So that's statistically unlikely.
Right.
So Elkhart's a great dining market right now, and that certainly hasn't always been the case. You've always been able to get good food, but it's mostly been mom, pa, family, Italian places, and there's a hacienda and that kind of thing. So we really happy and proud to have been part of that. I've been in business in Elkhart since 1988 at the Matterhorn, so and going to the Wayback Machine, and that was a fine dining restaurant for a long time, and I love working in Elkhart. The customers are great, our friends, we have a lot of friends there, and they support the restaurants. So, and downtown's hopping.
Yeah,
it's really
sure is, and a real credit. I think you hit the nail on the head with that quality of place and how important that is to so Peg, as we move, we're getting our last 3 minutes or so, just talk about just maybe the continuous evolution, trying to adapt to changing diner needs or changing hours or something. You mentioned, for example, you're not open 7 days, you're open 5 days. But my guess is, and maybe more people are breakfast, lunch. Just give us a feel for current trends, the things that you as a restaurant owner have got to be thinking about to sort of stay on the front edge of where things are at.
Right. We develop new menus. Frequently, we have our main menu, which everybody wants some of the same things for breakfast all the time. So we run specials that help diversify what we're doing a little bit. So we try to stay on trend on that. But more than anything is the hospitality end of it. What can we do extra? And that becomes very natural for my staff to go above and beyond hospitality-wise, whether it is singing to a groom as he leaves to go get married. We're singing Go Into the Chapel, and then he returns the next day and we're singing I Can't Help Falling in Love. And these things that we do that the staff embraces, learning names, running outside to help someone in that's coming in a walker, and some of that stuff you can't train. You can continue to encourage it, which I strongly encourage it, but that's about the hiring of the people that are going to really care about our customers. So I think that helps to set us apart. We've seen nothing but good things coming in the years to come. So
great. And Kurt, I'll come your way in about a minute or so.
Yeah.
So you're trying to help the industry get to $1 trillion. What are the things you're doing to sort of stay on top of
so carryout's obviously bigger, so you've got to embrace that. Delivery, more people are eating more restaurant meals, not in that restaurant than ever before. That's continuing to grow, so you've got to follow that, figure out how that fits in with your restaurant. So our casual concepts, that works for. Our fine dining concepts, not as much. Some of that stuff doesn't translate, right? You get it in a box and it's a $37 piece of fresh fish and you're like, it's not quite what they want, so the value proposition. But you've got to, value is really the thing. So if we want to continue to get people to spend such a large percentage of their income in restaurants, and that grows every year, we have to offer better and more value. And value is a two-sided proposition, right? It's not just how much you pay for something, it's what you get for it. And so our focus is on more value in everything we do, so that it's easier to get more people to want to spend those hard-earned dollars there.
Great. Well, thank you both. Tremendous success stories. We appreciate you being here today and sharing some of that with our viewers. So.
Yeah.
That's it for our show today. On behalf of the entire team here at PBS Michiana WNIT, thank you for watching or listening to our podcast. To watch this episode again or any of our past episodes, you can find Economic Outlook at WNIT.org or find our podcast on most major podcast platforms. We also encourage you to like us on Facebook or follow us on Twitter. I'm Jeff Ray. I'll see you next time.
This WNIT local production has been made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.